Congresswoman, you are serving your third term in Congress, but you're first in the minority. What differences do you notice, if anything?
Oh, well, first of all, Amber, thanks for having me. And yes, it's been an honor to serve Nevada's 3rd District, and I got sworn in a majority. I had the pleasure of serving twice in the majority. In the minority, it's obviously going to be different. We're not going to control the agenda. But I will tell you, I've made a point of building my relationships across the aisle. I've been recognized out of 435 members as the 10th most bipartisan member. And so I'm always an optimist. I will work on issues where I hope we can get some bipartisan wins together. But I will tell you, just on what we saw displayed in the first week of Congress, it's pretty apparent that they're opening up the gates with some pretty extreme positions. And so basically, making sure that the ultra wealthy and people cheating taxes don't pay their fair share, rolling back the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest investment in climate change in history. And so I think that they're making their political points. However, I do think hopefully things will settle down and we can work together on some issues.
And I wonder how bipartisan you really can be when you have mentioned that the fringe, the more extreme Republicans, are seemingly in control so far.
Yeah, listen, you saw it play out during the leadership fight. You had 5 holdouts that got some concessions out of Kevin McCarthy that really tie his hands in his ability to even work across the aisle, especially the motion to vacate, which can be called by one person. But we also have the discharge petition where we can bypass a committee if we have enough bipartisan support to bring a bill to the floor. And so there's things that we can do. I do believe there are issues that we can work together. And as you know, I'm on the Appropriations Committee. We say there are Democrats, Republicans, and appropriators. And so we have to fund the government, and that's something that we'll be working to get done as well.
Well, on that topic, where do you stand on raising the debt ceiling?
Oh, listen, first of all, the debt ceiling has been raised time and time again. And Janet Yellen has just indicated that we're going to reach it here pretty soon, and there are drastic measures that we can take to extend it. But, as we know, there are some members who want to hold us all hostage. And ultimately, it will have an incredibly devastating impact on not just the U.S. economy, but the worldwide economy. And so I believe that, we are in a divided government. Republicans in the House, we have Democrats in the Senate and the President. And so ultimately we have got to come to an agreement, but basically holding the worldwide economy hostage for something that Congress has dealt with time and time again, I think is very dangerous. And so I believe that we're going to have to work together to address this issue, and it's coming up very quickly.
How soon would you like to address it?
Well,
or would you entertain?
I think before June is really when we're going to have to do it.
Okay. Would you entertain some of the Republicans' desires to make spending cuts?
Well, listen, it depends where they want to. I'm hearing Medicare and Social Security, which I am opposed to. So we're going to have to see what those proposals are, but it's going to be a tough negotiation.
What bipartisan legislation are you working on currently?
Well, listen, in the 117th, I was most proud of our bipartisan infrastructure package, which came out of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a caucus that I'm a member of. And in April of 21, that bill was deemed dead. And we got together and really put that framework together. And ultimately, that's what's passed. That included my large-scale water recycling bill, which is freeing up federal funds to support large-scale water recycling projects like the one that the Southern Nevada Water Authority is entered into an agreement with LA Metro, where LA Metro builds a facility and we keep the water in Lake Mead. And so that is my opener to say that drought is my number one issue. You know, we have members from Utah, from Arizona, from Colorado, California, Nevada, Wyoming, and so it doesn't matter. Lack of water is not a Democrat or Republican issue. That is something that is at a crisis level, and Congress is going to have to step in and help out.
What can be done by Congress in that area?
Well, listen, this year we have the Farm Bill up for reauthorization. And we know that some of the pressure on water is through agriculture use, some of it not the most efficient use. And so I do believe there's opportunities in that bill to do some conservation funding, to support some transferring of maybe crops and things like that. And I do think that we have to continue to work to conserve and to make sure we're looking at our best alternative uses.
What does that look like, conservation funding and transferring crops? Paying farmers to
Sometimes,
not?
you know, we included that in the bipartisan infrastructure package, $4 billion that would go to help with water conservation, building covered channels, building more water efficient modes of transporting water, but also incentivizing farmers to maybe fallow out some fields where they do flood irrigation in the arid Southwest to transfer to a less water intensive crop. You know, you don't want to put farmers out of business, so trying to come to help them and incentivize them to make that transfer so we can save the water.
On the topic of immigration, what in your opinion is preventing Democrats and Republicans from coming together and enacting meaningful reform?
Yeah, you know, this has been something that has plagued Congress for far too long. You know, in 2013, there was an agreement. And in fact, it sort of brings back this whole motion to vacate issue as well. You know, Boehner stepped down and said that it was his biggest regret not bringing this comprehensive bill to the floor. So we've been struggling with that ever since then. And I think the biggest barrier is people draw their red line first, instead of trying to figure out where are the areas where we can agree. And so you're never going to come to an agreement if you draw your red line and say, I'm never going to cross it. And I think the other thing that trips us up as well is, you know, when you talk about a comprehensive package, you know, whether you're talking border security, we know border security is so important. You know, we have dreamers and DACA recipients who have been living in fear for years and with the lack of security. And so when we get to a certain point, you know, people just feel like maybe it's easier just to deal with one of these issues, right? Like maybe we'll just peel this issue off. But it's such a intertwined, complicated system, in that you really can't deal with one issue without dealing with the other. And so I think that we have to start out with sort of these are the common things we're going to work on and work out from there. And you know, and just be committed to completing it. And because this country needs it, we need it for, you know, to honor what this country is about. We need it economically as well. And so, but it's been such a political football for so long. And I hope that people can put some of that toxicity aside, because we need to work on this for the sake of our country, just for who we are as a country, but also for our economics.
And it's interesting because Representative Mark Amodei was on and said the same exact thing about drawing red lines and really just sticking to one side and not willing to negotiate. But then at the same time, he and Senator Cortez Masto have said, yes, we believe it's possible to both bolster border security and to enact protections for dreamers. So if they can both agree on that,
right,
I don't understand, what is the sticking point? What are some of the sticking points that you see?
Yeah, I mean, what ends up, it really, to me, it is a matter of looking at everything and looking at visas and looking at enforcement. And, people get stuck on one thing and say, if this isn't included, you can't have my vote. And then if you don't have their vote and then you include something else and someone says, if that's included, you don't have my vote, and then the deal falls apart. And so ultimately people have to, I think, hold their gunpowder until we get the full framework. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard negotiation, but we have to do it.
What have you learned in your time as one of the most bipartisan members in those negotiations?
Listen, I think that in general, you get things done with people you have a relationship with. And you don't have a relationship with someone if you don't talk to them and find those opportunities to build that relationship, find out their kids' names, know what they like to do in their spare time, know about their history. And so I'm hoping, a lot of our time in Congress, a lot of my career has been during COVID. So you really didn't have those opportunities to sit down with people on the floor, to maybe go out to dinner, to spend that face-to-face time. And so I think that that's something that we can do more to improve upon and work to build more. I'm the chairwoman or the co-chair of the Women's Bipartisan Caucus, which is obviously an opportunity for Democrats and Republicans really to just, work on issues that are very important to women. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, but also take that time to learn who your fellow members are. So when there is an issue, I passed the Mobile Health Care Act. This is a bill that allows funding to be used for mobile health units. And before this bill was passed, if you got money from for the new access point, it could only be used for a building. I paired up with Richard Hudson from North Carolina. He represents a rural district. And then I went and met with all of the Energy and Commerce members who Republicans to ask them about this bill. It doesn't cost anything more. It's just really a way of changing the criteria for funding, but it frees up money that will be so impactful here in Nevada, where we have such deserts for people and lack of transportation, where we can bring health care to people. But it's also important to rural districts like Richard Hudson's in North Carolina. So just, finding those opportunities on some of these issues where we don't represent nearly anything that looks the same as a district, but we struggle with some of the same issues in terms of access to health care, and how can we find some common sense solutions.
And last question for you. Your district includes Laughlin, and according to the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, visitor volume there is down 30% from pre-pandemic numbers. What can you do to help in that area? Yeah,
listen, Laughlin obviously is an area that relies heavily on the river, on recreation off of the river. People are having trouble launching because of the lack of water. There's uncertainty with respect to the dam and the releases, et cetera. It's having a major impact on them. And so, number one, work on the drought, which I have done and will continue to do. I led the fight to make sure that we designate Aviqua May as a national monument. That has potential for some economic benefit from tourism in the area. And continuing to work to make sure we're doing everything we can to bolster that economy. And then, of course, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act with major investment in renewable energy. And that corridor is obviously a major asset to our state and to our country in terms of potential for development of renewable energy. So those are all areas we're continuing to work to make sure we bolster that economy.
U.S. Representative Susie Lee, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thanks, Amber.